Part 3 of session 75 and final one. Final one even for book 3. Let's talk here about the magical personality or higher self. Let's begin. We're coming from a long discussion in this session about psychic reading, about adept path wanderers and other topics, and we're going to get more into other topics here that we mentioned in the last session, and then we're going to get into the magical personality or higher self, which is a very interesting topic as it relates to that connection that we start to have between, let me call it, the unknown and this reality, which is what we call the higher self, is that unknown personality, that which works as intelligent energy because it's completely related to it. So before getting too many topics or terms in the way, there's nothing for me to do an introduction about. Just remember that we came from the discussion of wonders, I think was the last thing that we talked about. Then another question about I turned it into the creator, of course, because that's what Ra answered, but it was about Carla going into surgery and if they could do something else. So Ra's answer, as always, it's pretty substantial as to how we can direct it towards maintaining this joy. You see, one of the things, let me say this as an introduction, I think it's important in our path to remember that we are accustomed to looking at the world, life, reality, always as I need to figure this out because I am in pain. You see, that's okay, because that's our cue or our call, but eventually we need to become more aware that that's not the proper direction. You see, I'm solving this because I am in pain. You need to make way for this this feeling that everything is okay, actually, and all I'm doing is recognizing that what I thought was pain and what I thought was trouble, suffering, and so on was just merely in my mind. You see, so there's a lot of resistance there. And I think that's something that is not spoken about much, because that's the transition that happens between the separate self and the higher self, if you will, or the absolute self. All these terms are helpful to understand what we're dealing with, because it's a process, you see. And as a process, we can break it down into pieces, but in the end, it's just one process. And that one process has always been harmonious, perfect, beautiful, and we do approach it from that point of view that I am missing something, I am wrong, I have flaws, I have imperfections, and so on, and that's okay. That's a good approach, but it doesn't lead us. It doesn't stand the proof of time, right? Is that how it's said? I don't know, but you get my meaning. Over time, you just start noticing that, oh, that was just, made up in my mind. We feel this. We feel this a lot as we realize that, let's say, for example, my anger against somebody was just unfounded. My jealousy, my fear of lack, my fear of loss, or whatever. All of these things, you just realize that they were phantoms, basically. So in the same way, there is a phantom in terms of I am missing something. All right. So with that in mind, I don't even remember why I got into all of that, but I figured that was necessary for some reason. But let me get into the next question that we have here to finish this session 75. Question 26. Don says in question 26, you spoke in a previous session about certain Hebrew and Sanskrit sound vibratory complexes being powerful because they were mathematically related to that which was the creation. Could you expand on this understanding, please, as to how these are linked? Ra says, as we previously stated, linkage is mathematical or that of the ratio. You may consider it musical. There are those whose mind-body, or I correct myself, there are those whose mind complex activities would attempt to resolve this mathematical ratio, but at present the coloration of the intone vowel is part of the vibration which cannot be accurately measured. However, it is equivalent to types of rotation of your primary material particles. So I'm just going to give my interpretation here, because it's not that like I have some sort of knowledge of these vowels, much less of the mathematical ratios that Ra is talking about here, but I can use my my limited intuition, or the limited information that comes from my intuition and connection, pattern recognition here, which is just, I mean, it's nothing. I consider this question to be interesting, but not of true importance. So what's happening? Vowels that are pronounced. There are sound vibrations, right? There are vibrations of the air, and the frequency of the vibration of the air is equal or similar to that which is primal vibrations. That's why Ra equates them to the rotation of primary particles, primary material particles, which to me may be atoms, which are stable, you see. And so they sort of, they are describing a movement or a pattern of movement that seems to be harmonious, right? That's why when we investigate certain particles, radioactive particles, they're not stable, right? We create atoms. We have been creating atoms for a while since we started tinkering with this, but they are unstable because it's like putting too much energy into the patterns of space, let me call it that, or at least their density. Who knows? I'm getting into unknown territory here, but just working with what I have here, I would think that is, you see? So there is a sort of blueprint, a diagram, a matrix, if you will, of harmonious patterns, of dances that are capable of being sustained. And those are, the vibrations. So the vowels very likely follow these type of frequencies. So this is why chanting certain things can actually make you resonate literally with the universe, with the harmonious pattern or matrix of the universe. Now, do I think this is important? No, because these are, of course, it would be nice if the whole world was harmonious, but do we need to make the world harmonious for us to be in harmony? No. Do we need to chant these things to become enlightened or whatever? No. They are helpful, of course, because they do induce the state of mind. You see, this is why chanting, there's a reason why we chant in every single spiritual belief. This is the reason why we naturally, as humans, if we are left alone and we could, take care of our food, take care of our shelter, take care of our health, be safe, the first thing we'll do is sing and dance. I guarantee you. We'll make up for something, we would play. That's what we humans do. We make music, you see? So I think that's why Ra says you may consider it musical. Makes sense. A linkage is mathematical or that of duration, but we cannot measure it because we don't have the tools for that. We're not even investigating in that direction as scientists. And so, yeah, that's my whole take on this. Again, interesting, but to me it's not that important. Let's move on. Question 27. Don says, if these sounds are precisely vibrated, then what effect or use would they have with respect to the purposes of the adept? Ra says, you may consider the concept of sympathetic resonance. When certain sounds are correctly vibrated, the creation sings. So You see, this still validates, at least in my mind, in the way that I'm perceiving it. So how can this help the adept? Well, the concept is sympathetic resonance. To me, sympathetic is directly related. You see, when you are, people say, I am empathic, an empath. I feel somebody else's emotion. But sympathetic, or being sympathetic, or sympathetic, is being in direct relationship to completely be in resonance. I think that's what it is, and that's why Ra uses the word resonance. See, when you're sympathetic to somebody else's situation, you are in resonance. You know what they're feeling. You understand. You get it. And so that is what happens. You are in resonance with the universe, or with the pattern of the matrix of the universe. When certain sounds are correctly vibrated, the creation sings. Simple as that. It's like filling the gaps, or filling the void. Let's call it that. There is a void awaiting to be filled, and it's filled harmoniously. I hope that makes sense. That's how I see it, at least. There's more about this, I think. Question 28, Don says, would these sounds then be of a musical nature, in that there would be a musical arrangement of many different sound vibrations, or would this apply to just one single note? Or which would it apply more to? Ra says, this query is not easily answered. In some cases, only the intone vowel has effect. In other cases, most notably Sanskrit combinations, the selection of harmonic intervals is also of resonant nature. So, yeah, I don't even know what to add to this. Don is asking, I guess, a lot of questions, and maybe a complexity that is not easily understood with words, because you need practice and feeling and knowing. This all comes with practice. Again, I know Don was in the position of asking information, so that could be applicable, him being a scientist, of course. But yeah, it's not easily answered, as Ra says, and I can see why. Yeah, these sounds of musical nature, there would be musical arrangement of many different sound vibrations. It seems to me like Don wants to know, what's the composition? Would this apply to just one single note? Yeah, he wants to know the parts. Can I assemble it? That's what that was done. And so, yeah, Ra says in some cases only the intone vowel has effect. See? So maybe it's not. It's like, you see, music is silence and sound. So only the sound makes sense. The consonant. There might even be, you see, consonants are just given the direction of the vowel. If you can see sound, if that makes sense, if you can visualize sound, you can see that consonants are always given direction to the vowel. And so no matter how we pronounce the vowel, is the consonant that gives direction and structure to it. It's beautiful, actually. So I suppose that the vowels are the ones that are making the music here, and so not the consonants. So I don't know. The selection of harmonic intervals is also of resonant nature with the Sanskrit combinations. So yeah, that's a study for somebody else. I think we have one more question here. Let's see. Question 29, Don says, then would the adept use this resonant quality to become more one with the creation, and therefore attain his objective in that way? Ra says it would perhaps be more accurate to state that in this circumstance, the creation becomes more and more contained within the practitioner. The balance of your query is correct. Beautiful answer, man. Wow. So Don is saying that the adept would use this chanting, this intoning of the vowels and the chanting and everything else to become more one with the creation. Now you see, here's where I would definitely add my own experience and my own path because in the hopes that it's helpful to understand what Ra means here. And it's a very subtle distinction that Ra makes. They don't make a correction. They make a distinction, a refinement. You see, they polish what Don said. Would the adept use this resonant quality to become more one with the creation, and therefore attain his objective in that way? So what's happening? The adept is using this to become more one. Now, this is in the direction of the separate self. I would like to become one with the creation. You see, this is assuming that I am not one with the creation at the moment. And so I do this to become one. It is true that doing this alleviates, lessens the sensation of separation, and so your one being shines. Your quality of oneness shines. Okay, so that's why Ra says the balance of your query is correct, but they would say perhaps to be more accurate to state that in this circumstance, when the chanting is in tone, the creation becomes more and more contained within the practitioner. The creation, everything, one, is more contained within the practitioner. This sings actually so well to me. Because you see, in my method, in my way of understanding this, which is, I keep saying it, I praise the direct path for this because it was the final link in my chain to make that chain of unity. You see, I was missing that one link, and that link was the direct path, the straight experimentation, or as I call it, imperience of myself. And the way I relay it to people is that you're not becoming one with the creation, right? You're recognizing that everything has always been within you. So there is no external world. It's only that you perceive your inner world projected outside, you see, and that has to do with the recognition of who is I, what is I. And so I love this answer because it goes straight into the feeling, the experience, or as I call it, imperience, because it's not external, it's internal, it's imperience. And yes, that is, you become, the creation becomes more and more contained within the practitioner. It's just a beautiful distinction. If you read the raw material with this love for the self, you can see it everywhere. You can see how Ra is always given that, point it this way, it'll make more sense. So I love it. All right, let's go on. Don, of course, wants to know, could you tell me the musical name of the notes to be in tone that are of this quality? Ra says, we may not. Of course not. So Don says, I didn't think that you could, but I thought it wouldn't hurt to ask. Then I assumed that these must be sought out and determined by empirical observation of their effect by the seeker. Is this correct? Ra says, this is partially correct. As your seeking continues, there will be added to empirical data that acuity of sensibility which continued working in the ways of the adept offers. Yes, that phrasing is confusing to me, but yeah, in the ways that the adept offers. So the ways of the adept offer this acuity of sensibility. All right, so this is just the development of the self. This is why I say that, we shouldn't be looking for specific information or practices or anything. We should just find out what works for us. This is in terms of, what works for everybody. And yes, if you are, let's say you have availability in a temple or a priest, or doesn't matter what religion or spirituality, and they can teach you this type of chantings and practices, and they resonate with you, literally, no pun intended, then that's great, it works for you. But if you don't need it. this does reflect in this answer. At least I can see that Ra is saying that as you continue, as your seeking continues, there will be added to empirical data. That's what you can prove within yourself. It's empirical. It's right there. It's observable. It's something that you can practice over and over again. That acuity of sensibility. So that is added, right? That acuity of sensibility, which continued working in the ways of the adept offers. So it continues developing in the ways that the adept offers. Not the adept, but the ways of the adept that offers. That's what's confusing to me. English is confusing to me, and Ra makes it even more confusing. What a catalyst is Ra for me in English. It has been. It really has. But yeah, so in essence, my take away here is trust in your development. Trust in that which makes you... You see, I have found, which is curious, I'll give you two examples of mine. First is that I'll give you external and internal experiences. The external one has been music. Music is something that I have played with for meditation, for example. At the beginning, I couldn't meditate, but with music. So I put music. Then music was too distracting because it would invoke this emotion. I mean, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It would invoke this emotions and everything in me, and that was great. That's a type of meditation, I would say. That's a type of relaxation. I wouldn't call it meditation, as I'm very picky with my words. So that's a sort of even reflection, you can call it relaxation. But eventually I went to nature sounds, right? And that was more soothing. It was just not emotional. It was just something to make my mind just drift away and all that. But eventually that became distracting because I saw how my mind was going into the music, not the music, but the elements and so on. And then I finally, this was over the course of, say, a year or so, then I finally just preferred silence, just pure silence. And that doesn't mean silence that if my, which happens a lot here, my neighbor is mowing its lawn, or, I mean, summer here. This is why I love winter so much, because summer, I mean, all seasons except for winter, there's a lot of noise around, right? So that doesn't mean that I need full silence and I, completely isolate myself. No, it's just this, whatever is happening, that's silence to me. It's not pure silence. So that's that. And then there is my mind. That's the other example. My mind has been, I was seeking sort of visions and feelings and all these things at the beginning, and I thought there was something wrong with me because I never had visions. I mean, I did, but is that I was having expectations in my meditation, and it took me just not so long to realize that that's it. I'm only, aware of my thoughts. And then it was my thoughts. And then within my thoughts, I started realizing that, yeah, my thoughts are always there. And that's just like the noise. There's never pure silence. It's just what it is. And with my mind, that was that too. So you can call me very basic in terms of my practices, but that's just how my path has been. And I enjoy it. I really do. I sit here and I can work all day by the computer without music, nothing. I enjoy silence within my mind and in the environment. That's not to say that Julie plays music and it's in the background and there's things happening here and I hear them. See, it's just different. So I would use this as that, your path. If If it's music, there's people who listen to music all day. I don't know how they do that. To me, it's just strange, but that's their meditative practice, and it's all kind of music. So, in any case, my point is just do what it feels right, and there is no wrong. Period. Let's move on. Don changes topics here and says in question 32, the three aspects of the magical personality are stated to be power, love, and wisdom. Is this correct? And are these the only primary aspects of the magical personality? Ra says the three aspects of the magical personality, power, love, and wisdom, are so called in order that attention be paid to each aspect in developing the basic tool of the adept, that is, itself. It is by no means a personality of three aspects. It is a being of unity, being of sixth density, and equivalent to what you call your higher self, and at the same time is a personality enormously rich in variety of experience and subtlety of emotion. Wow. Okay, so let's unpack this one. Don's specific question was the three aspects of the magical personality. You see, I love how Don, being mechanical, always segmented things, and Ra complemented it with saying, yes, these things are for you to see. It's like saying, I want to show you a tree, right? And I'm going to show you the branches and the leaves. And so you may ask, oh, is the tree made up of branches and leaves? Yes, to a degree it is. But those are distinctions that we're looking at a tree. You see, you cannot plug the leaves out and call it a tree. You cannot plug branches out and call it a tree. A tree is a whole organism. It's one thing. And so in the same way, that's what Ra does with Don, as it is appropriate for the study to segment, to dissect things, because we can see, oh yeah, the branch is different from the leaf. I see it, just like love is different from wisdom, but the leaf belongs to the branch, and the branch wouldn't be a branch without the leaf. You see, so this is important for us to, what I call, integrate what we study. What we study needs to be integrated, otherwise it just stays as mumbo jumbo in our minds, and it doesn't sit well. Yeah, that's the word. It doesn't sit well within us. So, okay, three aspects of the magical personality. Just to collapse certain terms, magical personality is the invoking of the higher self, period. That's it. Now, that's just magical work, which I'm not very familiar with, not quite interested, but we can play with that, and I can give you my my understandings. This is something that's also we do this. I'm familiar with the only magical tradition or magical workings that I'm familiar with was in my first year when I I assisted, and I sort of work also with shamans and with plant medicine, and that was it. That's my only experience. Less than a year I was involved sort of in that with plant medicine, and again, mostly as a participant, not as a helper or anything. So as always, I like to investigate and know and question. So that's me asking questions. How does this work? How do you do this? And why do you do it this way? So that's where I got my information. So it's kind of related. You do something similar when you go into a ceremony with shamans and the whole, thing. Not just, you can do it at home too, but anyhow, this is about magical personality. So higher self invoked. Is this correct? And are these the only primary aspects of the magical personality? Yeah, so Ra is once again collapsing everything and saying the three aspects of the magical personality, power, love, and wisdom, are so called in order that attention be paid to each aspect in developing the basic tool of the adept, that is, itself. The self is made up of love, wisdom, and power. These three are obviously, I mean, we don't have to say, oh, I need to acquire those. No, you have them already. All you need to do is allow them to be. Allow your love to be so it can inform your wisdom. And power is derived from that. It's a natural thing. You don't have to practice magic, although magic or magical rituals and all these things, I'm sure they are helpful. There's a reason why people have been doing it for thousands of years. But there's a reason why a lot of people never did it, and they went the path of harmony and balance and complete enlightenment without this. So there's no need for it. So they are mentioned only for the entity to pay attention to these aspects of the self. You are developing the self. The self contains all of these. So you don't have to acquire them or accomplish them or whatever. It is by no means a personality of three aspects. Very important thing. The tree is not made of branches, leaves and trunk or roots or whatever else. It's just one. It's a being of unity, Ra says. Being of sixth density and equivalent to what you may call the higher self. So it is a being of unity, a being of sixth density, because that's the the density of unity, right? It's synonymous. A being of unity, being of sixth density, and equivalent to what you call your higher self. Now I'll get into the higher self in a bit. At the same time, is a personality enormously rich in variety of experience and subtlety of emotion. I'll explain that when I get to the higher self. Last part, Ra says, the three aspects are given that the neophyte not abuse the tools of its trade, but rather approach those tools balanced in the center of love and wisdom, and thus seeking power in order to serve. So very important, the three aspects are given that the neophyte, the new learner, right, not abuse the tools of his trade, which are power, love, and wisdom, but rather approach those tools balanced in the center of love and wisdom, and thus seeking power in order to serve. So, love and wisdom. First, Ra says that the heart center, love, is the springboard for spiritual work. That makes sense. Love and wisdom, these two. You develop wisdom as you allow love to be. You see, it just shines naturally, but you have to allow it, of course. So wisdom and love, these are the tools for seeking power in order to serve. Now, this is actually catered to both positive and negative, because you seek power in order to serve the self or in order to serve others. That's within the answer here. Now, the higher self, I said I was going to talk about the higher self. See, the higher self is not something that is extraneous to us. The higher self is that portion of our mind that is, when you quiet yourself, when you allow yourself to simply be, there is a sort of intelligent information that filters through your mind, right? And that is the higher self. That's why I remember Greg Braden talking about this, like he would do this, he would tap his heart and wait for an answer to come, and he would feel it and say, okay, that's the answer. He was tapping into his higher self. See, that kind of practice is tapping into your higher self. They even call it, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, great people that talk about this. They know that there's an intelligence within the heart. Well, that is the higher self. That is the higher self filtering the information there. So you listen to that. That's why it's a being of infinite experience. You see, when they say enormously rich in variety, you see, and of experience and subtlety of emotion, all of this is contained there. This is to me equated to that. As you develop yourself into becoming more and more faithful with the creation, this higher self shines. The higher self is not one that is coming here to put order into things, but to allow things to happen and to enjoy things as they happen. So as the personality, the persona, I should say, especially with these terms, the persona, the ego, the separate self dissolves, this higher self starts to come into being. Let me mention somebody else who you should know. Aaron Abke has been talking about this system that I believe he kind of synthesized with what do you call it? I forgot. Don't tell him that I forgot. But it's a system where he measures I forgot what it is. It's the frequency or something. But it's all about knowing where you are in terms of vibration, right? And that is, what we know as complete enlightenment in third density is the higher self. Is the higher self being invoked and lived by all the time, right? But that's a process. That is not something that you simply invoke and that's it, I'm done. So it's a process. And that's the path of the adept. So that's all I got to say so far. I think there's more about this, but we'll see. All right, let's move on. Don says, question 33. You mentioned in an earlier session that the hair was an antenna. Could you expand on that statement as to how that works? Ra says, it is difficult to do so due to the metaphysical nature of this antenna effect. Your physics are concerned with measurements in your physical complex of experience. The metaphysical nature of the contact of those in time-space is such that the hair, as it has significant length, becomes as a type of electrical battery which stays charged and tuned and is then able to aid contact, even when there are small anomalies in the contact. So here is one topic that I can't really talk about because I don't know much. I have heard that certain indigenous people, especially in the Americas, they would leave their hair long because of this also, something similar, but I can't remember exactly what it was. And yeah, there's not much information I can take out of here, but just to know that with our physics, we cannot make those measurements, as it's usually the case with metaphysics, and that the metaphysical nature of the contact of those in time-space, so contact with time-space entities, is significantly enhanced by the hair. Or not significantly, but somewhat enhanced by the hair. And it needs to be combed, of course. I remember that from here in the raw material, that they asked that her hair become combed, carless. And so they say there's also becomes a type of electrical battery which stays charged and tuned and is then able to aid contact with even when there are some anomalies in the contact. So all right, there's a tool, it's an antenna, it can help for contacts, but I don't have much to say there. Don goes on and says, well, is there an optimum length for hair for this aid? And Ra says, there is no outer limit on length, but the, shall we say, inner limit is approximately 4 to 4.5 inches, depending upon the strength of the contact and the nature of the instrument. Oh, let me just comment on that before I move to that next question. What am I gonna say? Yeah, there is an inner limit, so the length should be at least 4 to 4.5 inches. Right, 4 and 4.5. I don't know how much that is. So this is not that long, and depending upon the strength of the contact and the nature of the instrument. So yeah, I guess all these are variables. The strength of the contact, like in this case, it was very strong, I guess, and the nature of the instrument. So not much to say here. All right, moving on to question 35. Don says, may anyone in third density accomplish some degree of healing if they have the proper will, desire, and polarity? Or is there a minimal balance of the energy centers of the healer that is also necessary? Becoming a healer. Ra says, any entity may, at any time, instantaneously clear and balance its energy centers. Thus, in many cases, those normally quite blocked, weakened, and distorted may, through love and strength of will, become healers momentarily. To be a healer, by nature, one must indeed train in itself in the disciplines of the personality. So, healing. Again, let's go back to what healing is. Healing is the offering of a newly, more efficient configuration of the mind patterns of somebody else. It's the best way I can describe it shortly, succinctly. So, if that is healing, then anybody can become a healer momentarily, right? That's what Ra is saying. At any time, an entity may become instantaneously clear and balanced in its energy centers. So your ego or separate self can be completely taken out of the way. This is not related to healing, but I want you to feel what I believe this actually feels like at the moment of healing. Again, this is not related to healing, but imagine, I don't know if this has happened to you, but it has happened to me. When I treat somebody in an unkindly way, right? And that's because my ego is bursting, right? It's there, this way. And at that specific moment, the other person reflects to me their pain for what I did because of my desire to express myself in one way. I immediately am taken aback and I feel like my ego is deflated, popped like a balloon. That feeling where there is none of that and you just feel that compassion, that to me is similar to what this instantaneous, clear and balancing energy centers happens. You experience this vacuum, this void at the moment, and you feel that rush of love for the other person. So I think something similar happens when you become a healer on somebody instantaneously, you see, at any moment. And that's why Ra says they become healers momentarily. Now, they do say that, of course, to be a healer by nature, that's your vocation, profession, whatever you want to call it, then one must indeed train itself in the disciplines of the personality. Just as a reminder, disciplines of the personality we just talked about in the past sessions, I think. Know yourself, accept yourself, become the creator. That's how you become a healer. And as well as anything else, a teacher, a priest, or what the priest is supposed to represent. That sacramental being, you see. But all right, let's move on. 36, question 36, Don says, how does the use of the magical ritual of invoking the magical personality aid the mind-body-spirit complex totality? Could you expand on the answer you gave in the last session with respect to that? Ra says, when the magical personality is properly and efficaciously invoked, the self has invoked its higher self. Thus, a bridge betwixt space-time and time-space is made, and the sixth density magical personality experiences directly the third density catalyst for the duration of the working. It is most central to deliberately take off the magical personality after the working in order that the higher self resume its appropriate configuration as analog to the space-time mind-body-spirit. Okay, so they have talked about before invoking the magical personality when you do rituals or magical ritual. Again, this wasn't explained to me this way, but it was suggested, and then of course I surmised out of all of this that when the shamans tell you to do this, and that prior to a session or a ceremony, you are invoking your higher self, your magical personality. And part of that is how you dress, that's magical ritual, what you bring with you, your intentions, and so on. All of this is related to what I feel is invoking the magical personality for rituals, of course. So whenever you're going to do rituals and so on, it's important to do that, but at the same time, like Ra says, to take off the magical personality. I'm not sure how this works, what may happen if you don't. Something tells me that nothing terrible would happen, but only that I don't know, maybe it's not as efficient for you. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about this. But what Ra is saying here is that when the magical personality is properly and efficaciously invoked, so when you do this properly, you have invoked your higher self. As I said, you are invoking that part of yourself which is completely involved with reality as an experience, not as a separate self experiencing reality. Thus, a bridge betwixt space-time and time-space is made. Of course, this is your space-time reality. Higher self is the most inner part of your time-space reality. And the sixth density magical personality experiences directly the third density catalyst. So that part of yourself, which is very sensitive, of course, is there to experiencing it and to work with the catalyst. It is most central to deliberately take off the magical personality after the working in order that the higher self resume its appropriate configuration as analog. So I don't think it's such a problem. It's just that, everything goes into place again. When you do magical ritual, you're invoking that. And maybe what would happen is that you get tired, you get exhausted and your vital energies are depleted and so on. That's my guess. Again, it's a very uneducated guess. Please don't take it as something that will happen. I would just say I'm only leery of the interpretations that come out of this of fear. You see, fear always sprouts in us when we say, what can happen to me if I don't do this or if I do that, So I don't want that to be the case. But again, I don't know what the effects would be. I'm not qualified to know it. And I would just say that, if you're conscious enough to want to invoke the magical personality, then you can revert back to whatever you feel that you are without the magical personality. But again, this also, I have my little qualms with this because, yes, it still sort of perpetuates the idea that I'm a separate self, and that's not my teachings. It's not my path. So, but I guess I understand the context in which this is expressed. But let's express another question. Don says in question 37, then you are saying that the act, the signal, or the key for the invoking of the magical personality, which is the putting of something on or a gesture, you should as carefully take that something off or reverse the gesture, perhaps at the end of the invocation. Is this correct? Ra says, this is correct. It should be fastidiously accomplished, either in mind or by gesture as well, if this is of significant aid. So, after the invocation, so does that mean that after you invoke it, you dismiss it? I don't know. I would think it's after the ritual or the working that you're going to do. Doesn't make sense to invoke it and say, all right, thanks for coming in, bye. But that's what I got from Don's question. In any case, there is the putting on of something. If you feel, some people do that. They put on something and they feel right there. They're in the zone with the putting on of something and the garb or whatever it is. And some people, like me, we just like to settle within our minds, and be there and know, okay, I am in this place of worship of the self, the one self that exists, the one and only, the one infinite creator. You see, that's how I feel it, though. It's not even a thing that I do, but it's a seeking. It's the seeking of that beautiful place, which is you. I love it. So, yeah, Ra says that it should be meticulously accomplished, either in mind or by gesture, fastidiously done. All right, let's move on to another question. Don says, question 38, now the invocation of the magical personality is not necessarily effective for the neophyte. Is there a point at which there is a definite quantum change and that magical personality does then reside? Or can it be done in small degrees or percentages of magical personality as the neophyte becomes more adept? Ra says the latter is correct, and the latter is that done in small degrees or percentages. I'll talk about this because I think there's something more that Don is going to ask. Let me see. This is the real key for us who are not involved in occultism or esoteric traditions or any specific religion that has its ways. I'm talking generally. Maybe some of you are, and you already know this, so I don't have much to tell you then. But how the vast majority of us who are not involved in all of this can expect this magical personality to happen, or the invocation of it, how this process would happen. So yeah, let's read the next question, which is more informative about it. Question 39, Don says, then is it correct that a good sequence for developing the invocation of the magical personality are alternate meditations? First on power, then a meditation on love, and then a meditation on wisdom, and to continue cycling that way. Is that an appropriate technique? Ra says, this is indeed an appropriate technique. In this particular group, there is an additional aid in that each entity manifests one of these qualities in a manner which approaches the archetype. Thusly, visualization may be personalized and much love and support within the group generated. So, yeah, I will take now the time to expand on this. The neophyte, as Don said, right? I think it was Don. In any case, the neophyte, the newcomer, the newbie, the spiritual newbie. Anybody really starts from there, from small percentages of invoking the magical personality. One, because it has no idea how it works, it has no experience, and as it gains experience, then that invoking of the magical personality becomes stronger and stronger. This makes sense. This is with anything. If you go to the gym and start running or lifting weights or whatever it is, you know how limited you are. You're a newbie. And as you practice, you become better at what you do. Simple. Same thing here. And now, Don says that, is this correct then, the sequence of meditation? Once again, Don being mechanical, it cannot be said that Don is incorrect. And that's why Ra says this is indeed an appropriate technique. The magical personality, again, he's going by the elements or aspects of power, love, and wisdom. And that would be appropriate, of course, because those are aspects of the magical personality. It is balance in love and wisdom, and it derives power. You see, it uses power, that power of serving others or serving the self. So is that an appropriate way? Yes, it is an appropriate way, but it is not the way. That's important to mention. Again, Ra says, this is indeed an appropriate technique. As usual, I like to emphasize that, because then we say Oh, then that is the way. I should meditate on love and wisdom and power. Not necessarily. Let's go back to Ra's answer when they say, let us collapse all of this into the self. That's what the adept is working on, growing, you see. The self it contains everything, you see. So you're not developing, but rather allowing that to be. And that's why you can see it in percentages too. You don't know the power of your love yet because you have been cloudy about it. It's been a foggy sort of relationship that you have with yourself. And so as you clear out your energy centers, then that love is shining. Then you say, oh, I recognize myself more and more. That has been me all the time. And wisdom is the capacity to express that honestly, yourself. So you see, you have always been working not on love as a sort of branch or wisdom as a sort of leaf, no, or a fruit, power as the fruit. It has been you. You are the tree. You are one being. And so as you allow this to be, then you say, I mean, from a studying perspective, it makes sense to say, yes, I am developing love. I am developing wisdom. I am acquiring wisdom. All of this is just chatter, is a way to abstract the process of evolution. The evolution is the knowing of the self. Let's just put it simply, without too much jargon in between, is the knowing of the self. Who are you? You see? And you have to start, I like to start, this is why we have progressive path, direct path. And so we go straight into who am I truly? You see? And from there you develop. Or you can go the traditional ways of going step by step, going through different practices and exercises and mind conditionings and so on, or deconditionings. All of this, that's all well and good. They both take you to knowing the self. And when you realize it, you've always been the self. So it's funny. That's why in Zen, they are so adamant about jokes, about the essence of joke, not about any mundane joke, but anything that takes you to the moment. That in the moment is you. You have always been you. You see? So, all right. We have one more question. Did I properly... Let me just finish this answer, because Ra does say that in this particular group, there is an additional aid, to this. Not only that you can do it individually, but that in each entity manifests one of these qualities. Well, Jim is power, I believe, right? Jim is power, Carla is love, Dawn is wisdom. So the three of them embody those archetypes, right? So those archetypes definitely are... It's almost like each individually can work in their power, wisdom, and love, right? But at the same time, they, as a whole, they shine more as power, as love, and as wisdom. So the three of them kind of like make this beautiful, harmonious relationship that Ra can actually... Sixth density, you see? You can even see here why they were able to contact Ra. Because not only themselves in their seeking, but their collective, between the three of them, there was enough power, wisdom, and love of seeking of the magical personality, which is Ra, sixth density, higher self, right? Makes total sense to me. So, yeah, that's the last thing. Thusly, visualization may be personalized and much love and support within the group generated. Yes, so, and you can see that Carla represented that love right there as an open vessel for the contact to happen. Don was the one asking the questions, wisdom. And what did Jim do the whole time? He was sitting on a chair, single-pointedly directing energy to Carla. Power. That's beautiful. So yeah, there's so many ways we can play with this. But let's move on with the last question. Question 40, Don says, is the exercise of fire the best for the instrument, or is there anything better that we could do other than, of course, the things that you have already suggested to aid the instrument? Ra says, continue as you are at present. We cannot speak of the future as we may then affect it, but there is great possibility, if you follow the path which you now tread, that more efficacious methods for the entire group will be established. This instrument begins to show rapid distortion towards increase of pain. We, therefore, would offer time for any brief queries before we leave this working. It's a very long session, and it ends pretty standard with, is there anything we can do to aid the instrument, so on. And Ra just says, nope, everything is well, continue in love and light, and all that jazz. So, what can we say here? The exercise of fire, I have no idea what that is, but it's something that they practice themselves, Don, Carla, and Jim. And Ra's answer is beautiful, as usual. Continue as you are at present. Stop worrying. That's all Ra always said. Stop worrying, man. You're fine. Whatever it is that you're doing, you're fine. It's funny when you see, the thing is that Ra doesn't say it with our slang and language, right? But that's what they're saying. Relax, everything is fine. Don't worry. When you start worrying, then you complicate things. And when you complicate things, then you worry. And when you worry, you complicate things, and you can see how that becomes a feedback loop. We cannot speak of the future as we may then affect it, of course. If we say yes, then they will allow Don, Carl, and Jim to start doing the exercise of fire. The sensibility of people to follow directions is very important for teachers to not, and I see this all the time within myself. I know when I sometimes say something and I realize that, oh yes, that may be interpreted as something that you should do. So I'm very careful with the way I offer things. I unfold them in front of you, so you can pick. It's you who picks it. I'm not saying that this should be the way, or this is the practice, or you should do that. What works for me is what works for me, and I can only share that. So yes, if you follow the path, but there is great possibility, if you follow the path which you now tread, which is all of us, we're all following this path, right? Our individual path. More efficacious methods for the entire group will be established. This is completely relevant to all of us as well, because we are developing our own ways, and the only thing of value that you can actually share is you. That's how it works. It's not something you acquire that you need to learn. You don't go to college to become you. You are already you. But college can actually help, in allowing you to shine. So that's fine. Or a temple, or, your culture, or whatever it is. All of these things are helping you shine what you truly are without them. But there are mirrors. There are reflections of you. And that's how you develop. All right. Conclusions. The end of session 75, the end of session, actually book 3. I'm only going to talk about this development of the self, right? Because that's what we've had so far. The self is you, and I've been saying it all along. I can only complicate it more for you by talking, because this is something that we can only investigate without the chatter, without the mind giving us so many illusions about the self. And all along in these 3 books, we have been talking about this. Yes, we've been talking about pyramids and UFOs and other historical stuff, and mechanics of metaphysics and so on. But hidden within all of this, there has been the relationship of what we think we are as a separate self and the the absolute self. It's what I actually have in the board right there, which is the contraction and contraction. I mean contraction, and is it contraction? Yes, an extension. But yeah, it's an extension into the outer and a contraction into the inner. The inner is the self, the outer is the separate self. Or rather, is not the separate self. The outer is the manifested self. You see? The form out of the void. But you need the void for the form, you need the form for the void. Otherwise you wouldn't have them. So this is the whole being. You see, it's not that the one creator is resting somewhere and is looking behind a pane of glass. No, the one self is this. This is how the self looks, actually. This is the mind of the self. Does that make sense? You see, all along we think that the creator is somewhere sitting on a cloud or behind the vacuum or something, like a figure. But no, it's like the dream or imagination, This is what the self looks when it's imagining things. You see, it's you. And so all of this sounds very mystical and it sounds very foreign. But I guarantee you, I grew up as a Catholic. I then abandoned that and became a scientist. Hardcore scientist. And I'm glad I went through the path of self-realization. That's the only thing that gave me value. The rest of the information that I share here is just because it's a way to talk about. It's philosophy. It's the love of wisdom, of knowledge, of gnosis. But nothing is more helpful than to know yourself, know who you are. And that being my path is the only thing that I can offer in these and every other method that I have available for you to enjoy what I share and what I do. So with that, I come to the end of this session and book 3. Like I said, we're going to begin book 4. We're going to get more into the tarot and the archetypical mind, something that is very profound. I hope to do my best there because I am not an expert on it, but as usual, that's what I am. I'm only here to talk about philosophy and the self. Thank you for watching all these 3 books with me. Book 4 is going to continue without any pause in my production. So, nothing else to say, as usual. That's just the distinction here between book 3 and book 4, but we're moving along. I'll see you next week with session 76.